We're here with Sean McDonald, who is involved with Hatch this year as, were you the curator? Is that your title? How would you?
Not exactly. I think what they call it is the discipline head. The first stage of involvement is really just the sort of meetings and planning with the Hatch board.
Hmm.
Uh, in my case, the board member I sort of worked most closely with was Allison Watson,
Hmm.
and she had some ideas about who to bring in for design and technology. I had some ideas, and Yarrow Craner, the founder of Hatch, and someone on the Hatch Bozeman board had some ideas. So there was a discussion about who should be involved, and then invitations, of course, going out, and some logistics there. But then the biggest thing is really kind of owning that discipline during the event. And in D&T we had what I would break into three separate components of how the mentors really interacted with each other and with the community. And so I managed all of those as well.
So what do you do outside of Hatch? What's your MO out in California?
Sort of in my whole life, there's really basically only four things I can do other than eating and sleeping. I have a startup company I started a few years ago uh, called Jute Networks
Okay.
that does a very specific type of data visualization that I would call sociography.
Uh-huh.
And that's sort of the intersection of cartography and sociology.
Okay.
So it's drawing maps of human relationships. And the simple version of why that's important is if you look at anything with a large amount of data, it's much easier to make sense of it when you visualize it.
Right.
Just like if you were to have to read the weather forecast, and try to read where the clouds were, or if you had to try to read your way around New York City, it'd be very confusing to just take all the data in a text format. So we visualize it. We show weather radar maps, and we have maps in New York City that show it's 4 blocks up to the best hot dog stand or whatever. And what I do is to create maps of relationship networks. So that's the vast majority of what I spend my time doing. Um, and I'm the co-chair of the board of the Bob Moog Foundation,
Okay.
which uses music to teach science.
Right.
And so we're developing curriculum, developing technology, doing all the things that we have to do to use music to teach science, and sort of hope that someday we'll be inspiring that next Bob Moog, or that next generation of Bob Moogs out there.
Yeah.
We're, of course, also working on the museum project in Asheville. Put a little plug in, and anybody who happens to hear this, you can go to the Orange Peel and see what we call our mini Moogseum, which has one of Bob's Grammy Awards and some other interesting stuff from the history of Bob Moog. It's right there in the entryway to the Orange Peel. And then I volunteer with Hatch, and I go mountain biking. That's
That's a full
that's
plate.
that's pretty much my deal. But yeah, that's what I do.
I can see where the Moog Foundation and Hatch really line up. Being that
Yeah.
Moog is one of the most innovative music technicians, in the history of time. And that's
Yeah, and we're one of a few examples of people who found Asheville to be a good place to engage their creativity.
sure.
Uh, and it's interesting working together on Hatch. The Moog Foundation's been involved in a couple of ways, and this past year we made Bob Moog's archives one of the sort of four rather focal points of the Design and Technology Gallery,
Nice.
which is kind of a cool thing about Hatch. I go to a lot of software conferences and stuff like that,
Hmm.
and uh, it's very rare that software is put in the context of art, at least most of the time. And so for the design and technology discipline to even have a gallery,
Right.
it is kind of sweet. Usually it would have a website or something like that, and
Yeah.
we actually brought some of Bob Moog's archives in, and they were of course in museum cases and that kind of thing,
Hmm.
but really inspirational stuff. And then to see other art installations, like we had Ben Mason,
Right.
who do an interactive installation of like octophonic sound and
Right, right.
video controlled sound engagement, stuff
Hmm.
like that. And then we had an artist there, and then another one of our mentors brought all those 3D sculptures.
Right.
So it was cool to have the Moog Foundation engaged in that way. And then there's some behind the scenes stuff too that we work together on. And um, one of the interesting behind the scenes things is this is the second year we've done a field trip for the design and technology mentors as well as any other mentors who want to come.
Was that the Illuminati trip?
Well, we do two of them. So
Oh,
we did
nice.
one. We do on Friday morning. We offer a tour of the Moog Music Factory,
Nice.
which is pretty cool and this very hands-on kind of thing. And Saturday morning, we offer a tour of the known universe.
Hmm.
So it's a fun email to send out,
Like a
like
long
Friday
tour.
morning. Right, Friday morning tour of a factory, Saturday morning tour of existence. And a lot of people do both, which is kind of cool.
No doubt.
So there's a bunch of tie-ins between the Moog Foundation and Hatch that are really excited about what we've done, and I think there's a lot more on the horizon.
That sounds good. That actually is a great lead into the next question. Well, first off, how do you feel like Hatch in Asheville 2010 went? And then what do you see? How do you see it evolving?
So, I mean, internally, I think Hatch in Asheville, the Hatch Asheville 2010 was amazing.
Hmm.
My personal experience was extraordinary. I was just honored to be working with the design and technology mentors
Sure.
for who they are outside of Hatch.
Right.
These are people that I have followed and want to work with and want to engage with. So, um,
That was actually
it-
one thing that Allison had said about this festival that makes it so special. Is
yeah,
just that we were able to get in a room with people that are world renowned that we would never be able to even
yeah.
get in a room with, much less get to talk to them and interact with them after seeing their presentation.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And the truth, I tell people pretty regularly, the secret of Hatch is that you get out of it what you put into it.
Right.
And I've been a really committed volunteer since the time that we launched the idea of Hatch Asheville at Hatch
Hmm.
Bozeman 2.5 years ago.
Right.
And I've gotten an insane amount out of it, both personally and professionally. So I thought Hatch Asheville, pardon the expression, kicked ass. This
Pardon.
year, everything from the quality of the presentations through the fun in the VIP lounge at midnight, how
Oh yeah.
good the networking parties were, how many
Right.
local restaurants stepped up and provided amazing things.
Yeah.
I think a good indicator is that it absolutely kills me that I'm in charge of a discipline because I can't go to most of the other stuff. Like on Sunday, I got to do a couple things,
Right.
but it just, I mean, it hurts when you know that
Locks
this
up your time.
architecture panel is going on at the same time that you're, prepping people for a keynote, and it's
Sure.
like, oh, man, I wish I could go to every single one of these things. So I think that's a good sign. I think there's some challenges.
Hmm.
I think Western North Carolina does not do a good job of getting much out of Hatch
Hmm.
at any broader scale.
Hmm.
I think for the people who do show up, the people who do participate, the people who quote unquote get it, Hatch is this incredible, like potentially life changing, potentially career uh, enhancing
Oh yeah.
kind of experience. But having spent a lot of time trying to be a part of an entrepreneurial economy in Western North Carolina,
Hmm.
there's some people who don't show up and some organizations that don't show up and get involved
Right.
that I think it's disappointing. To my knowledge, Hatch 2010 had the densest concentration of world leading innovative people who are hyper connected throughout the global scene of at least in design and technology.
Right. You'd think everyone would
And
want a piece of it.
you would
To
think
witness
you
it at
would
least.
right, you would think that the mayor and Congressman Schuler would be pounding down doors to get a business card from these people.
Right.
You would think that, and that's probably a bad example because I'm more thinking of the, the people whose careers are directly tied to these designers and technologists who don't necessarily uh, show up and don't necessarily want to get involved. And that's okay. Please, I don't want to be misinterpreted as suggesting
No, no, no.
that I don't respect people's opinions or what they want to get involved in. But I think for the value of Hatch and what it brings to Western North Carolina, there should be at least twice as many people who are trying to get involved. I guess that's the bottom line.
Every single thing that I saw was just like, oh, it's actually reality bending.
Yeah.
Seeing the cutting edge of innovation in a lot of these different industries. So I feel
Yeah.
really privileged to be a part of it. But I hear you too. Like, the reason I was able to get so much out of it compared to Hatch 2009 was because I got involved.
Yep.
So I think that as far as advice goes, you hit it right on the head with that.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I mean, in the technology world, we would call Hatch a platform, which means you can sort of do what you want with it,
Right.
and that's a good thing to be, because it means that eventually people will figure it out,
Right.
and then once you do it in 2010 and you realize the more you put into it, the more you get out of it,
Hmm.
it's an easy decision in 2011 whether or not you're going to get involved.
Right. Outstanding.